strength and the benefit of good guidance to perform our duties honestly, wisely, fearlessly, and well for the good of those we seek to serve. Please proceed.
Thank you.
I'd like to call the regular council meeting for October 20th to order. And before I go to the agenda, I would just like to, from this council and to the family and friends of Shirley Garriock, who was the granddaughter of William Chalmers Duncan, the first mayor of the city, passed away a short time ago, and she was, I believe, over 100 years old.
We're close.
She was, and she had come to most, I think, all of the annual meetings that I've been part of this council. She would be here in December to watch the council's annual event, and she was
Front and center at our centennial.
front and center. Yeah, she was participated in the centennial of the city, and a very nice, warm, kind lady, and always engaging. In fact, the last time I saw her, she recognized me every time, and we'd have a chat, and so just like to recognize her passing. Also, our corporate administrator, Karen Robertson, isn't here this evening. She's had a tragedy in the family, and we just like to send our condolences and best wishes to her and her family as well.
Absolutely.
So we'll move to late items. Ms. May, do we have any late items? Okay, thank you. So I have the motion to approve the agenda as circulated, moved and seconded. Thank you. Any discussion on that? All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. We move to adoption of minutes. We have the September 14th council minutes for adoption.
So moved.
Thank you. Seconder. Thank you. Any errors, omissions? Hearing none. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. We have the September 14th, 2015 public hearing minutes, and those are a motion to receive.
So moved.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. We move to item 4.3, which is the September 28th special council minutes, and a motion to adopt.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Thank you. Discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. And we have item 4.4, the October 5th Committee of the Whole minutes, and those are also for adoption.
So moved.
Thank you. Second. Good. Discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. We'll move to item 5, which is a rise and report. This is with respect to a North Council request to transfer a portion of the city's water mains and system. And the following motion was adopted at the October 13th, 2015 special closed meeting. That the City of Duncan advised the municipality of North Council that it will not transfer any portion of the city's water distribution system to the District of North Council due to the financial and operational implications of doing so, and that the city commit to upgrading its water mains in the University Village area and other parts of the water distribution system to ensure adequate fire protection and domestic demand for all users with the upgrades as detailed in the 2014 and 2008 Focus Corporation report titled Water System Analysis, North Council Area, and Water Model Update, to be coordinated as best as possible with the municipality of North Council road improvement projects.
So moved.
Well, it's already moved. It's just for information.
Okay.
It's a rise and report.
Oh, right, of
so
course.
It's passed at the special council meeting. So that's for public information. We have moved to the next item, which is item 6.1, and we have Mr. Graham Bruce, the actually it says Executive Director. You're actually the CEO of the Island Corridor Foundation. Read the upgrade on the Island Corridor Foundation, and there are some materials that you distributed. Welcome, Graham. I think you're all well known by most here and in the area. So
thank you very much for the opportunity to come and speak to you about the Island Corridor Foundation. I've got a bit of a PowerPoint here. I'm going to fly through fast. You can slow me down if you like. I know you've got other business. I'm happy to be here as long as you want me to be here, but I don't want to overstay my welcome.
Well, it might take up questions, but typically we have a I think it's 10-minute delegation, and then questions are open from council. So
Okay.
if you can do it as tight as possible, that would be
I
great.
will indeed.
Thank
You
you.
have on your table there in front of you a little pamphlet. I won't go through it. It's just some background information about the ICF, the landmass, and how it came to be, and the articles of what the Island Quarter Foundation was intended to do. And the primary purpose of the Island Quarter Foundation was to preserve and protect the corridor from Victoria to Courtenay, from Duncan out to Lake Cowichan, and from Parksville out to Port Alberni. It was the leadership, really, of several people, Harv Alphonse of the Cowichan Tribes as chief, and several other First Nation individuals and local mayors that came together back in about 2003, and I believe, Your Worship, you were part of that group. And it was as a result that CPR was looking to divest of the corridor. They were going to divvy it all up and sell it off. And through some innovative work by both the chiefs and the municipal councils, there was a process put in place that preserved that or stopped that from happening. And then through some very innovative and creative thinking, developed a foundation, got a charitable number, convinced CPR to donate the entire corridor to the people of Vancouver Island for $1 and a very large tax credit, which worked to everybody's advantage, and a very unique situation. You will see here just on the map the communities that the corridor runs through, and maybe not as well from there, you'll see the number of First Nations. Rail was not a particularly happy event for the First Nation people here on Vancouver Island, probably anywhere in Canada at the time that it was brought into effect. And it was really quite a testament to our First Nation communities that they would band together with the local governments, with regional governments, to form the foundation, to preserve the land, to sustain rail, improve rail, and to build trails. And if you think of the fact that for the most part of the actual activity of rail and trail goes right through the communities of the First Nation communities themselves, it's really quite a step up to the plate for what they've done, and the reason they are very much a part and supportive of the corridor. Just so that you know, in respect to what the Island Corridor Foundation, I'm going to try and give you more about what the ICF does than just the rail itself. Rail is one part of it. Trail is a very important part of it, and I'll speak to that in a little bit further in the presentation. But the benefits for our First Nation people is very much a paramount concern and interest of our board. It's a 12-member board. It's made up of 6 representatives from local government, the 5 regional districts that the rail line passes through, 1 member at large, and 5 representatives, or 6 First Nation representatives, 5 representatives of various bands along the corridor, and 1 representative at large. Just so that you know who they may be, the current chair of the ICF is Mayor Bill McKay of the city of Nanaimo. Judith Sayers is the co-chair. They work in tandem in respect to First Nation and non-First Nation. Ken McCrae, former mayor of Port Alberni and now also the chair of the Port of Alberni. Mary Ashley used to be the mayor of Campbell River and now retired from that. Phil, your worship. Ray Goche, who's the economic development officer for Chemainus First Nation. L.B. Charlie, for those of you who know, from Council Cowichan Tribes. Lonnie Norris, who's land manager for Halalt First Nation. Cyril Livingston, the chief of Lake Cowichan. And so that's the board. In respect to First Nation benefits, what we are working on and hopeful to be able to put in place is a Trackman Training and Apprenticeship and Employment Program. All of the work that we've been doing in the run-up to what I'm going to describe as the actual infrastructure project has been in an effort to make sure that there are benefits for our First Nation communities. We're very fortunate in that we have a rail company, Southern Rail of Vancouver Island. People before me who were on the board were able to entice this organization to come and be the rail operative. If you own a rail line and you want to run it as a rail line, you have to have a rail operating company that knows how to run rail. Neither Phil nor I know actually how to do it, although I'm pretty good at a Lionel set because I used to have a big Lionel train set in the basement of my dad's house. But that's all I know about that part. So they were able to entice Southern Rail. Southern Rail is a subsidiary of Southern Rail, or SRY Link, of British Columbia. That's also part of the Washington Marine Transportation Group, Washington Group of Companies, C-SPAN Intermodal. It's a very large company and provides the resources necessary to make sure that we'll be able to sustain and improve rail on Vancouver Island. They have come together with the ICF, fully appreciate the necessity of benefits for our First Nation communities. So the actual employment and training program will be something that we will be developing through and with the actual work element, the employment group at Southern Rail. They've also committed $80,000 in scholarships for engineer and conductor training of our First Nation communities. So what we would hope for over time is that the actual work complement, running the trains, the actual individuals that are driving the trains and conducting the trains are from our First Nation communities. It would sort of be nice that somebody would know someone that's on the train when it's actually driving through the middle of the backyard and rumbling their foundations of their homes. And I don't mean that in a light way. It's a serious issue. So that's that part. I'll just move along a little bit here. The actual infrastructure program is a $20.9 million project. When I came on board with ICF, there was no structure. There was a firm, Lanark. Doug Backhouse was the executive director. The board at that time wanted to step up the game and develop an organization through the Island Quarter Foundation that could manage the affairs of the ICF and develop it into a full-time operation. Part of what we needed to do at that point was deal with the province of British Columbia, who were undertaking a study of the assets and the opportunity for rail. As you well know, there's no shortage of political debate as to whether there's any future for rail on Vancouver Island or not, and how much work needed to be done to be able to sustain and improve rail. It ran from 120 million to 300 million, and the province was charged with coming back with some sort of program or recommendation that would allow us to find a way to actually improve on rail in an incremental process. And in that study that came down in October of 2010, we were able to sustain an incremental approach. We came up with a strategy that would allow us to develop a rail program for passenger service, virtually the VIA passenger service over a 10-year program, and allow the rail company to expand in the other elements of rail that I'm going to describe here shortly. The actual program, what I just showed you there was the bridge work, which was being assessed, undertaken by another extensive study. There are 40 bridges and structures from Victoria to Courtenay. On the Victoria sub, they're in much better condition than anybody would have you believe. Very thorough engineering report was done by the province of British Columbia, and the work that needed to be done came in at $5.9 million, which was on the previous slide, and that goes in with the actual infrastructure work of $15 million, which is basically replacing 1/4 of the ties between Victoria and Courtenay, all of the tie joints, and 2 to 4 inches of ballast along the way. It's not rocket science. The drainage along the corridor is, we're on rock, it's good loam. The railway professional people, as opposed to experts, have actually done a very thorough job in the work that needs to be done, and stand by the program that we've got in place here. My challenge was to find the money. I had to find $15 million from the feds and the province. I'm sorry it took as long as it's taken to do, and I had to then find another $5.9 million through the regional government, the railway company, and the Island Quarter Foundation. Nobody wanted to lead. Everybody wanted to wait for the other guy to say they were in. So what I thought we could accomplish in a couple of years took 4 years to accomplish. Including in that was the necessity that we have an agreement from Via Rail, and let me just bounce along here. There's the new cars of what the passenger service cars will look like when they come back here to Vancouver Island. Via Rail, as you were aware, was running an intercity service between Victoria and Courtenay. Our rail company, Southern Rail, was prepared to take that on and run it in a different manner. They wanted to run it so that it would service the people of Vancouver Island rather than starting in Victoria And going to Courtenay, they wanted to be able to have control of the schedule and run it as demand would warrant. Initially, the service will run twice daily from Nanaimo to Victoria and on the weekend to Courtenay. As demand warrants and improved service increases, we hope to run more runs as far north as Courtenay. With Via Rail, just a little anecdote, the day I flew over to meet with Via Rail was in July of 2012. We needed to get a new Via agreement. Yves Julien St. Jardin was the man I was meeting with. As I boarded the plane to fly over there, I just had flicked off the radio. Via had just cut 2 runs in Quebec and fired 200 people. I didn't think that our prospects of getting a deal with Via sounded very good. When I met with him, the very first thing he said was, in respect to the program that we had presented, they wouldn't be covering any passenger liability insurance, and they only had 1.4 million in subsidy, and we wanted 1.8 million. In the course of a very long, protracted negotiation, which was virtually a case of staring at each other over the period of 2 years, we were able to convince them to take on the liability. We were able to convince them to give us the cars. We were able to convince them to give us $1.4 million and control of the schedule. And we were able to convince Southern Rail to throw in the other $500,000. So people of BC, or people of Vancouver Island, did okay on that by being patient.
So just a reminder, Graham, we are running close to our time, so about 3 or 4 minutes. And I know
Okay.
we've got a lot of stuff to cover, but
On the freight opportunities, it's important to note that there is linkage from Nanaimo to the mainland. We don't always understand the opportunity that rail presents to Vancouver Island. And this is the Nanaimo Yard. That's the slip that takes us over across the water to Annacis Island. And that's the Annacis Island slip that Southern Rail owns. That puts us in connection with 3 Class 1 railways. That is really the only site on the west coast of North America that has that opportunity, CPCN BNSF, which gives us an advantage in respect to competition for shipping goods, having goods come into our ports, both in the Nanaimo port and the Port Alberni port, transferred by rail to the mainland and shipped into the interior.
Excuse me just for a moment. We have often allowed speakers who have something of a great interest to say to speak a little bit longer. Is there a motion that I can make? Because I think
leave that to council if you'd like to give Graham a bit more time, because there's quite a bit of material to cover.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it should be done by motion. Just
Okay,
stick
I
with our
move that
procedure
we give
bylaws.
Mr. Bruce another 10 minutes, or
I'll
as
be-
long as it takes for him to finish his presentation.
Is that seconded?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna call the question on that. All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried.
Okay, that's great. 'cause
So,
this
Graham,
is-
so you have
this
a bit
is
more time.
Interesting, yeah.
Just going to back up. So the actual Via Rail system and the infrastructure work that I had explained to you in the $20.9 million project, where we're at right now is that we have the approval of the regional funding, we have the Southern Rail Run funding, we have the ICF funding, we have the sign-off from the province of British Columbia, which we got late July of this year. Unfortunately, we couldn't stop an early call for a federal election, so we couldn't get the sign-off from Infrastructure Canada because we need a minister's sign-off. We had to wait till yesterday, and now we'll have to wait to a cabinet, and we need the sign-off from whoever the minister will be responsible for Infrastructure Canada. All of our work and information is with Infrastructure Canada, and I don't see any reason why we won't get a federal Treasury Board approval, and then the work will be tendered and the work can begin, and then the actual VIA service will start once that work is complete. The intention is to start the VIA service once we reach Nanaimo. The work will start in Victoria, will run right up the island. Once we get to Nanaimo, we'll start the service running Nanaimo to Victoria twice daily. Then when we get to Qualicum, we'll go as far as Qualicum with the rail service, and then when we get to Courtenay, we'll go all the way to Courtenay. That's the plan. We're sticking to it. While we've been putting these pieces together in respect to Via Rail and the passenger service, Southern Rail and the Nanaimo Port Authority have been working in concert to develop an excursion rail program. As you well know, there is a cruise ship terminal that was built several years ago in Nanaimo. The Nanaimo Port Authority has been trying to attract more cruise ships. You understand the benefit of that, and you see the result of what's taken place in the city of Victoria. There is a demand for cruise ship ports. We've got the port. One thing the cruise ship industry were very emphatic with the Nanaimo Port Authority was you need other activities. Our rail yard is a stone's throw. It's a throw from center field to home plate between where our track is and where the cruise ships come in. And there you see we have our first cruise ship, and there we have our train. This is all at Nanaimo on the Wellcox property. And so what the intention is, the work that's being done between the Nanaimo Port Authority and the rail company is to, they've done a feasibility study. They see both with the additional cruise ships that they think they can attract in the next couple of years. I think they have 7, they've had 7 this year, they think they get up to 15, and I think they have a potential look at about 30. With a train that looks like this, and we have that train, this isn't a figment of anybody's imagination, that's located in Squamish, and they're working with the Nanaimo Port Authority and SVI. This train will run initially between the Nanaimo Port Authority and Chemainus while we expand out on the run. It will also be used as an excursion train to take in events along the corridor, and there are many on Vancouver Island, all from the Philbert Festival, the Splashdown in Victoria, the Sunfest that you have right here in Cowichan, and Light Up in Ladysmith. They believe there's real good market potential for an excursion tourist feature train. And so this isn't, again, pie in the sky. This is actual work that's being done. I'm giving you kind of an inside to it. There'll be a more formal announcement once all the final pieces are put in place. And that's another look at it. You may not know this, but we already have a fair amount of tourism activity that takes place on the island corridor. On the Alberni sub, there's a 6-mile agreement that we have with the Alberni Pacific Railway, which also operates McLean Mill. They rebuilt the train station in downtown Alberni. They run a steam train during the summer months. This is a real authentic steam train, as you can see. They run it in the summer months from downtown Alberni out to McLean Mill. It's actually probably one of the best rail tourist attractions in North America. They need some more promotion. We've been working with them, but they've got things that they wish to do themselves. And they also have the active steam mill that works right there. They're cutting timber. They actually cut ties for us. We use them for tie crossings on our roads. They're a great group, and they're also working on developing more of a operation along the Alberni sub all the way out to Coombs for our speeder groups. You may have seen in the summertime the little speeder runs that come through town here once in a while. We're looking to actually have a mainline run of speeders operational between Alberni and Coombs in time. And there's a group within the APR that are doing that. Here you go. This is what everybody always looks for. Is there ever going to be a commuter train? So we painted it up, and there it is. That's what it looks like. We actually did a fair amount of extensive work on a commuter run between Victoria and Langford while we were working, trying to get the VIA and the infrastructure work. The distance between Montreal and Vancouver Island was far too great, and what happened every time we started talking about commuter rail between the western communities and maybe coming as far as Cowichan, VIA would send us great notes about they were not into commuter rail. And we soon discovered, and we were going back and meeting with them, that they thought that we were trying to set them up through the VIA service to run a commuter service. Via Rail is not commuter service. Via Rail is intercity service. Commuter service looks like this. This is another type of light rail train not run by Via. We have some work and plans that groundwork that's been done in that respect. And as we get this work done, then we'll turn that back to probably the CRD in the western communities and see whether or not they want to put something together that might actually run as a commuter link. Maybe initially as a pilot project, half a dozen times in the morning, half a dozen times in the afternoon. We also are mandated to protect our heritage buildings. That's the Nanaimo station. That looks very good. When I first came on board, it had just suffered another fire. When I got to the building, my only reaction was the Nanaimo Fire Department was a little bit too efficient and got there a minute and a half too early. Otherwise, the whole thing would have burnt down. And I mean, as far as if you went in there, it was destroyed. It was Heritage Canada building, so we had to rebuild it as to Heritage Canada prescriptions. Darren Moss of Tectonica, a young fellow out in Nanaimo, did an absolutely phenomenal job. It's It's a $2.5 million project. We got Via Rail to throw in $900,000 of insurance. We raised $450,000 with the young professionals of Nanaimo. We found a tenant, which is the Irish pub that's there and operating, and then we're able to secure a mortgage to round out the $2.5 million. And it's been operating now for the last 2.5 years. And if you're up there, you go in there. It's a nice little restaurant, a great pub. I told you about Alberni. You know what you're doing here in Duncan, and we'll be working on that as we move along because we still have a little section of that allow us to have a passenger service. But we've got the museum in there. One of the things we're wanting to do is to make sure that all of our stations are open and active and have activity around them. We have a station in Qualicum, which the city of Nanaimo, or the city of Qualicum Beach has actually done a great renovation job on that one, and there may be a commercial activity of some sort that we'll be able to put in on that one. We have 2 stations missing, so to speak. Victoria is the primary one, and we have an area there that there's land owned by the Island Quarter Foundation, which will probably be the site of the first location of a station. It may be that there is a more permanent station built further in along the line, or a secondary one for commuter service. But at this point, we haven't made any firm decisions as to the exact location of that. But we have it. Stations in that type of the new stations will be more platform stations. West Hills Development Corporation in Langford, wanting the commuter service, has agreed to build a platform station in Langford, and we've given that right to use the land. Rail trail, we've got extensive rail trail happening all the way along. Cowichan Valley is a lead in that. In Victoria, in the Capital Regional District, we've constructed trail pretty much all the way out to Langford. There's work being done now, the last gap between Langford and Shawnigan Lake. Then we have trail that's constructed here from out to the Commons into North Cowichan. Of course, the complete line that goes from Duncan out to Lake Cowichan on the CP run, and then from Lake Cowichan through to the Kingsville Trestle on the old CN run. And then we have trail constructed through Chemainus, more trail in Saltaire, extensive trail through Nanaimo and more under construction, trail through Lanceville. We have trail being planned by the RDN from Coombs out to, or from Parksville out to Coombs, and plans to go out to French Creek. And in Courtenay, we have the Courtenay Rotarians constructed 3 or 4 miles of trail right now to tie into their trail network. Just so that you know, probably the strongest tourism opportunity in all of this and all of Vancouver Island is trail development. There's the Vancouver Island Spine Trail Association, Trans-Canada Trail, and the ICF, working in conjunction with our 5 regional governments. By the time we're finished in this, you'll be able to hike, bike, or ride all the way from Victoria to Port Hardy and out to Cape Scott, from Parksville out to Port Alberni, down the canal, back through Nitnat and through Lake Cowichan on our trail. And we like to think we only have gaps left, but that's stretching it. There's more than gaps. However, there's a great opportunity coming up in the Trans-Canada Trail, which is really that portion of trail between Victoria and Nanaimo. There are particular thoughts going on with the 150th anniversary Canada's celebration that there may be an economic drive to be able to sustain funds to complete the trails between Victoria and Nanaimo. We play a fairly important role in that because there are a number of rivers that need to be crossed. We have bridges, and we're trying to figure out how we can link that together. So that's the trails. There's a little bit of a map. Those are the trails that I mentioned just constructed. ICF operations, I'll quickly bounce through. We are self-sustaining operational funding. We have over 700 agreements that we manage between a whole host of accounts. We have new utility applications on a weekly basis. BC Hydro, TELUS, municipalities such as your own, First Nations and Fortis. We have encroachments and licenses of occupation. So we bring in about $500,000 a year in revenue. Part of my obvious responsibility is to negotiate all major agreements, reports. I told you about the Ministry of Transportation Rail evaluation. We just finished negotiating a hydro master agreement. ICF and the SVI long-term operating agreement, which is a big document, which explains what the arrangement will be between the parties. The VI train service agreement. the federal, provincial, regional agreements and the regional trail agreements. City of Duncan and the ICF Land Use as one of the entities that are as part of this through the 5 regional governments. The permissive tax exemption that you grant each year to the ICF, and in that you also get the Duncan train station and the museum use that's there. There's several parking lots, there's walking trails, and there's multiple crossings, road utilities, dikes that all flow onto the land of the Island Corridor Foundation. And we do this all the way up and down with all the municipalities and all of the First Nations regional governments. And that's the story at this point, and I'd be happy if you had any questions.
Okay. Councillor Jackson.
That's just what we think is going to happen this winter.
I love that picture. I like the picture of the old CP train with the beaver on it too. That's gorgeous. Just a really quick question. I think this is really interesting, and I heard a lot of just fascinating things. I'm looking on page 18 at the possible commuter train. I gather that's just sort of an example, because while it doesn't have a cow catcher on the front, we do have elk and wildlife and everything. So I'm just assuming that this is what it could look like, but
Yeah.
not what it is going to look like.
No, you're absolutely right. That's what it could look like. That is called a light rail train.
Yeah.
So everything we do in respect to rail is based on weight and speed. And so when we shut down the via passenger service, lots of people wondered why we were able to continue to run freight. Well, freight you could just slow down, so the speed aspect of things was taken out of context, so you could still run safely at a lower speed. This is a light rail train. That's the image that you get there. If you see the other engines, they're big and heavy.
Yeah.
And so those combinations allow us to do certain things on certain pieces of track. This type of train is a light rail train, and that would run between Victoria and Langford, some description of a train looking like that.
Right, but you wouldn't have like a wildlife catcher on the front. Okay,
No,
thank you.
go a little faster.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Councillor Staples.
Thank you very much for the presentation. This is one of those things that we hear bits and pieces of information always from so many different people about the foundation, but never really what's happening. So it's really good to now have a much broader understanding of what the plans is, where things are, what's been going on behind the scenes, and recognizing that you've put a ton of work into this and how appreciated it is. And share how important it is to share it too, so that we can all understand. I know that this comes up a lot at different communities. It's very echoey, this thing, hey?
Yeah.
I don't know what it is. So I want to thank you for all of that, because I think it looks amazing what's happening, and from the sounds of it, it's been quite the process. And it's just good to finally hear it in such detail. And my question for you is really just, it's sort of something that might sound, after the amazing presentation that you give, a little bit picky, but it's just around cleanup around the lines running through town.
Right.
For example, we do get a lot of people in our community complaining about the fact that we're not taking care of the brush and the grass and everything else. And it hasn't been taken care of for quite some time. And just wondering, when that happens, and are there regular maintenance schedules around that, and who's responsible for it, and who do we go to if it's not being done?
This is, no, we appreciate that very much, and we have garbage concerns all the way up and down the corridor, and it's a real challenge. 140 miles of corridor. We actually have a community living just north of Nanaimo. I'm trying to figure out whether the board goes up and throws them out, or whether I go up and throw them out. Part of this, this will change once rail starts to run again. Even our operational team, they're cut back to a minimum, because we're really only running trains now from Nanaimo up to North Nanaimo. And as soon as the work starts, a lot of that will improve. And then the ongoing activity of daily trains running will make a considerable difference. We have a board meeting coming up, and one of the subjects is garbage. I mean, it's just a real big problem. In some jurisdictions, we've been able to work out agreements. Alberni, they look after all the garbage pickup. We've tried to make those arrangements with a number of others. We do a little bit of push and a shove. We literally don't have the wherewithal to be able to pick it up. But it will get better, simply because of the fact that with the rail starting and the work to go on there, then with the trains running, we'll find an active railway cuts down dramatically on that type of problem. But I don't have a quick answer for you, apart from grabbing a wheelbarrow and going out and trying to pick it up. It is a problem. Yeah.
And not only garbage, but also just the growth around it, like the broom and everything else as
Right.
well. So there is a possibility for the city to work with
Absolutely.
Island Corridor to work out some kind of arrangement so that we can actually clean it up, because that's been part of it as
If
well.
we're talking
right, is we don't have
specifically,
access
yeah,
to
if we're
that.
talking specifically right here, absolutely.
And does that go the same for, in some of the areas, there's a lot of walking areas where we have the trails that you're talking about.
Yeah.
And they just sort of end when we hit into the Island Corridor territory, that
Right.
whatever, I think it's 12 feet, or I can't remember how many feet it is away from
Yeah.
the track.
Yeah.
And so we run into having to stop there. And so there's a lot of, in the wintertime, in a few particular areas, a lot of flooding that happens, a lot of mud, and they're high access areas. So can those things also be worked out with you in
Yeah.
terms of how to deal with that situation? In terms of
Most of the regional trail agreements, we've negotiated or completed the agreements with the Capital Regional District and with Nanaimo, just about finished with Cowichan here. And there are provisions in there in respect to the regional governments. This is a very unique creation of we're all cousins, or we're actually all connected at the hip here. The manner of how the creation of the ICF was to give it standalone status from the governments, be it First Nation or local governments, so there wasn't the liability factor that was on their place, and also so that the responsibility remained with the organization. As the rail starts to run, they have a very aggressive sightline aspect of things, and there'll be much more brushing and clearing than what you've seen to this point. But that'll take us getting going.
And in terms too of working out some sort of an agreement, is that possible for discussion around those areas that do flood, that are pedestrian heavy, even though they're not right beside the track, they're not in the sort of a danger zone, but in those transition areas, those are...
We can't do anything that would encourage walking other than where the trail is. As soon as you do that, we've already broken a lot of, not rules, I don't mean rules, but we've progressed into new territory of having a trail constructed by rail. Railroaders hate it. And so we've had to work within the Rail Act, within the British Columbia Safety Authority, to get the agreement and how this is done. So as soon as this is the problem we have. It's sort of like our crossing right here, where everybody walks. As soon as we put the crossing in, we collectively, and acknowledge that that's where you're going to go back and forth. Even though we've been walking across that rail for 100 years, we take on all the liability of that crossing. And so then we have to encourage people to only cross of where that crossing is, not just back and forth everywhere else. So when we build the trails, and then we have other areas in there that people may be walking on, one of the things we're going to have to be doing is encouraging, and through a safety campaign, you walk on the trails, you don't walk off the trails. And not make it accessible. It's a fine line.
Okay, thank you. And I guess the only other thing, and I realize that we have been talking about it too, is the storage unit that you have here that's been sitting there for a very long time with a lot of dead trees around it. And who bears the liability of the cost of cleaning that up and taking care of that?
Well, I think Peter may have a program for you, or something he's going to bring.
We have something
Oh,
on
okay.
On the agenda.
Oh, right, of course. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Excellent.
Okay. Any other questions?
No, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity.
Okay.
Am I able to leave?
You can if you'd like, yeah.
No, you have to stay.
There are a couple that item and another with respect to the permissive tax exemption on the agenda, but that's further along.
Thanks very much.
Okay, thank you. And I do see we will have a challenge there because we will be short of a quorum. So with respect to procedure, when you have people recusing themselves on a discussion in the agenda, we will have below quorum.
We will have to have a special meeting because we're required to have the bylaw adopted by October 31st.
Correct.
So special meeting? Yeah, okay. Okay.
Okay.
Unless Councillor Bell can call
We may need, yeah, we may need to make some accommodation for that, because I just counted the numbers and realizing that we had 2 away, and 2 will be recusing yourselves on that particular item. We won't have quorum. Okay, so we'll carry on with the agenda then. So we'll move to item 7, which is the report of the CAO. Mr. Divertai.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll just touch on a few brief points in the report that's in front of you there. Just to update on the Cedar Avenue upgrades, the water main has now been tied in and the curbs have been poured. The streetlights will be following shortly, and Duncan paving is scheduled for early next week, weather permitting, of course. So I think the residents in the area will be happy to finally see some pavement there. We had on September 28th the first meeting of the new advisory design panel, and that first meeting went quite well. I was quite pleased with everyone's first go through, a bit of discussion actually on a bit of the design guidelines, and sort of got their feet wet into that. We have postponed their next meeting in anticipation of an amendment for 15 Canada Avenue for that panel to consider the amendment when it's come in. So we'll hopefully have that soon. Also, just to update briefly, on the website, the contract has been awarded to Thornley, and the first meetings of staff with the consultants will take place on November 2nd. And the first draft concepts will be brought to the Committee of the Whole when we have those to present. Also, maybe the last one would be to comment on the marketing RFP. It closes tomorrow, October 21st, and staff will review those proposals and provide a short list to the November Tourism Committee meeting for their review. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. So we'll move to the reports of staff. We have item 8.1, which is the building statistics report for September, and a motion to receive.
So moved.
Okay. Thank you. Any discussion on it? All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. We move to item 8.2, which is the key dates for 2016 for council. And the motion reads, the council approved the key dates calendar, which establishes the council and committee of the whole meetings in 2016, as attached to the report to the Director of Corporate Services, and that notice be provided by posting the key date calendars in public notice posting places on the city's website and advertised in the accordance with Section 94 of the Community Charter.
So moved.
Okay, and a seconder. Thank you. Any questions? All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. We move to item 8.3 on a quarter foundation, and this is the first item which we may run into a issue of quorum. And there's no accommodation under the Act where people are recusing themselves in attendance to a meeting. You lose quorum, my understanding. Okay. So we will, a motion maybe to, well, for this particular item, to refer it to, or table it to the next council meeting. It's not a time, I don't think it's a time sensitive issue.
True, but
Councillor Jackson.
on the other hand, I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, yes, we have to enter into an agreement with the Island Corridor Foundation, and I understand that a couple of you may be feeling that, generally speaking, you would be in conflict. But this is basically just to ask the staff to investigate the cost to clean up the building. I don't really see that you're in conflict, because we're just asking the staff to check into some pricing. Does that?
If we deferred it, I mean, depends on your view of the approach as to whether it's a benefit to ITCF for the city to take it on. So,
But it's not like there's a decision being made. We're just asking you to check into some facts. Right? We're not making a decision.
no, the first part of it, the recommendation is for there to be that. I would say best probably just to defer it to committee of the
Okay.
whole, and at that point you could give
Okay.
council or the staff some direction in that regard. So we'll just bring it forward to the.
Yeah, I think it
it's
could
not
quite
time
appropriately
sensitive.
be handled at a committee of the
Okay.
whole, which is coming up in early November, so.
Okay, so I move that would this be at the special committee? Or just the next?
You need to use your microphone. Sorry.
Thanks, Margaret. The permissive exemption bylaw will have to come to a special meeting before the end of October anyway, so the two
Okay.
might as well come together.
So I
if that's
move
the case.
that this be tabled
Well,
until
or
the-
referred
or
referred to the next committee of the whole.
The next
Would be an appropriate.
council
motion.
meeting, appropriate council meeting.
Okay.
Okay. So this is for committee of the whole. That would be the next
Oh, okay, sure.
appropriate meeting.
Yeah.
And then, because this item is not time sensitive, the next item with respect to that is.
Okay.
Just to
Your
update,
microphone's not turned on either, actually, sorry.
This
Is
one
it?
doesn't,
Okay.
yeah. Just to update, we are trying to get a hold of Councillor Bell to see if she's up for FaceTiming in, even though she's got a splitting headache.
Okay. All right. So at this point, on this item, though, it's not time sensitive, so we will, this is being referred, the motion's been made to refer to committee of the whole. Is there any, it's been seconded, any discussion on that? All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you. So we move to bylaws. We have item 9.1, which is bylaw number 3115.01, delegation of authority amendment, DP and personnel. The motion is there that council adopt delegation of authority bylaw number 3115.01, 2015, a bylaw to authorize the CAO to, one, approve minor revisions to development permits in accordance with the intent of the development permit area guidelines of the official community plan, and two, to appoint, promote, discipline, and dismiss employees other than dismissal of officers subject to a contract of employment or a collective agreement.
Second?
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? The motion carries. Item 9.2, which is bylaw 3137.01, financial plan amendment bylaw with respect to the Council Aquatic Center. The council give 3 readings to the financial plan amendment bylaw number 3137.01, a bylaw to authorize the transfer of a $48,000 from the Pioneer Park Reserve Fund to cover the cost of a one-time capital expenditure for the Council Aquatic Center.
So moved.
Okay, moved, seconded. Discussion? Did you want to get?
Yeah, I
some
was just going to
context?
ask if Mr. DeVertai could explain it for the people who are, or Ms. Saldera.
So there were a number of one-time large capital expenditures for the Cowichan Aquatic Center to be carried out in 2015 that were not included in our 2015 financial plan. So, and it's of an amount great enough that it's hard to absorb in our regular operating budget. So this would allow us to use some of the funds we have in reserve to help offset those additional expenditures.
Okay. Thank you. And hearing that, I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Move to item 9.3. We have a bylaw 3139, 2015, animal regulation and impounding bylaw, and that council give 3 readings to the animal regulation and impounding bylaw number 3139, 2015, a bylaw to regulate animals within the city of Duncan.
Second?
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Ms. Robertson did much of the work on this in reviewing and revising that bylaw, but she's unfortunately not here to give better context. But there are, I think, substantial improvements in it with respect to regulation. Councillor Staples.
Am I still going to echo? No. I just would also just like to say that the SPCA did come and talk to us about this, just for anyone out there. So we've had a lot of discussion with the SPCA regarding this too, which is a really important part of it. So I just wanted to mention that.
Your Worship, I can cover off one portion of the
Certainly.
Ms. Robertson's report that might highlight the notable changes in her report. Were a limit on the number of companion animals that can be kept on a single lot. A section related to prohibited animals, a section on animal welfare, which includes provisions related to animal cruelty, basic animal care requirements, outdoor shelter requirements, sanitation, tying of animals, transporting animals in motor vehicles, and exercising dogs from motor vehicles or bicycles. Guidelines for animals in public places, a section related to identification for the keeping of cats, meaning just that they require tattoos, and prohibitions on feeding wildlife, and lastly, some amendments to the additional requirements for the owners of aggressive dogs.
Okay. Thank you. And this will come back for final adoption at the next council meeting. Okay. Councillor Councillor Jackson.
And I think it's interesting, although it has been in the bylaw that driving along in a pickup truck with a car in the back is not legal. And I've seen that a couple of times in the last week. An untethered dog in the back of the car, and it's just a good reminder that an animal in the back of a truck has to be confined in a pen or a cage, because anybody that's seen a dog that's fallen out of a truck knows what that's like.
Okay, thank you. Did we call the question at this point? I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Somebody is going to take notes from Ms. May. Okay, thank you. Item 9.4, this is fee and charges amendment bylaw with respect to the same animal impounding fees. The council gives 3 readings to the City of Duncan fees and amendment charges amendment bylaw number 3140/2015, a bylaw to amend the impounding fees for animals in the City of Duncan.
So moved.
Okay, seconder, thank you. Discussion? All in favor? Opposed? The motion carries. We move to item 9.5, which is bylaw 3145/2015, permissive tax exemptions for 2016, that council adopts permissive tax exemption bylaw number 3145/2015, a bylaw to grant permissive tax exemptions for 2016.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. The next item, which is respect to the Island Quarter Foundation for 2016.
So I move that this be,
This will be an area where we,
Well,
do we have somebody?
We have, Councillor Bell is able to FaceTime in briefly for
Oh.
this, which will save us a special
Okay.
meeting.
wonderful.
So I will read out the exemption, and then I will be recusing myself, as I have a conflict of interest, as I'm a director of the Island Quarter Foundation, and I believe Councillor Bruce, can you name you have to tell us what your conflict is.
Graham Bruce is my brother.
Okay. So that council adopt permissive tax exemption bylaw number 3146/2015, a bylaw to grant permissive tax exemption for the Island Quarter Foundation for 2016. And I will recuse myself, and Councillor Staples will take over.
Okay. Do we have Councillor Bell? Okay, not quite yet. All right. Music or something?
So we're waiting to contact, waiting, or is she there?
She's waiting
Okay.
for us to contact.
Here she is.
Hi. Sorry to bother you. Thanks for helping.
It's okay.
Hi, Councillor Bell.
Hi.
I'll just read it out again now that you're here.
Okay.
Okay.
I got it.
So item 9.6, bylaw 3146, permissive tax exemption for the Island Corridor Foundation, that council adopt permissive tax exemption bylaw number 3146, a bylaw to grant permissive tax exemption for the Island Corridor Foundation for 2016.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, is there any discussion?
No.
No? Okay. Hearing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? And carried.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Have a good night.
You too.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay.
I'm not sure if I closed it off properly.
She's in the back.
carries. So we will move to item 9.7, which is bylaw 3147, 2015, which is respect to development cost charges, and that council give 3 readings to the development cost charge bylaw number 3147, 2015, a bylaw to impose development cost charges.
I'll excuse myself, because I'm in conflict.
Okay, could you use your microphone, because I'm not sure that that gets picked up for people.
I'll excuse myself on this because I'm in conflict.
Okay, thank you. And your conflict is?
Own a piece of commercial property.
Thank you.
I move the first 3 readings.
Okay, it's moved and seconded. Any discussion? Probably a good idea to just for the public to give a brief summary of this bylaw. Thank you.
So the development cost charges bylaw is a complete overhaul of our previous development cost charges bylaw, which hasn't been updated in about 25 years. So the fees are increasing quite substantially, at least, or doubling in some cases. However, the next bylaw on the agenda is a development cost charges waiver bylaw, which will essentially eliminate any increase in the majority of development cases. And so from here, after the bylaw gets 3rd reading this evening, it will go forward to the province for approval. And we have scheduled it to take effect on June 1st, 2016. This will allow time for developers to get proposals in prior to the new rates coming in. However, the waiver bylaw is proposed to start before that, so that development can even benefit even further than they would under the new bylaw scheme.
Okay, thank you. Any questions or discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. We move to item 9.8, which is with respect to the bylaw number 3148, which is development cost charge reduction bylaw, that council give first 3 readings. The development cost charges reduction bylaw number 3148, 2015, a bylaw to provide incentives for developers to design buildings that result in low environmental impact.
So moved.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion on this? This is a related bylaw, which is why Councillor Bruce is still outside. And same issue for conflict there, as he has a property that's scheduled for development. Councillor Jackson.
I just want to thank the staff on this. I just think it's a really, really creative way to get developers to use the green incentives, all the different things that are out there and available for people who want to have low greenhouse gases. And my understanding of this is if they do that and if they agree to involve themselves in putting these into their developments, that their development cost charges can be decreased significantly. And so I just think it's a really creative way to get people to think along those lines, and thank you very much.
I think one of the other advantages in development that we become more and more is the operating costs of buildings too. So there are economic benefits in buildings going forward, just not beyond what it does, impact it has for the environment, but also more efficient and effective building operation. So I will call the question then. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. And if we could ask Mr. Bruce to come back. Okay, thank you. We move on to reports of committees. The October 5th Committee of the Whole recommendations, and there's a number of them, I believe 6. And if Councillor Staples is the chair, you could report those out, please.
So 10.1, Canada Avenue and Government Street beautification, that Council approve the inclusion of up to $540,000 in the 2016 budget for undergrounding of BC Hydro services on Canada Avenue and the undergrounding of TELUS and Shaw services on Canada Avenue and Government Street along the frontage of the property located at 15 Canada Avenue, with an estimated recovery of approximately $225,000 from the owners of 15 Canada Avenue. And that Council directs staff to amend the 2015 financial plan so that up to $220,000 of the Fire Hall seismic upgrade project is funded from the gas tax fund instead of from the Police Bridging Capital Fund.
Okay.
So
Seconder?
seconded.
Okay, discussion? Did you want to give some background on this recommendation?
So funding for this project, it is a fairly large project. We must budget for a worst-case scenario, so that would be the $540,000 that we will be including in the budget. We do not imagine that it will actually end up costing that much. In order to ensure that we have funds to pay for it all in 1 year, we will fund part of the Fire Hall project, which was all to come from our Police Bridging Capital Reserve. We will fund part of it from the gas tax funds, which are, it is now an eligible project under the new gas tax agreement.
Okay,
That's great.
great.
Okay,
Thank you. So further discussion on that motion, or did you want to do all of them individually or all of them together?
Individually, yeah.
Okay, so I will then ask for further discussion on this motion. Councillor Horgan?
Are we getting participation from TELUS on this as well?
I believe not. I believe that there's a hydro program which they would contribute a third on the approval of their beautification program, and the developer has committed to his portion to match that third. So with respect to TELUS and Shaw, I don't believe they have programs like that.
Okay, and BC Hydro, are they going to participate?
Yes, Hydro is participating for all the undergrounding, and the developer's contributing towards the Canada Avenue undergrounding.
Thank you.
Okay. Any further discussion or questions? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries.
Okay. 10.1.2, Fire Hall seismic upgrade finance terms. The Council confirmed the offer of financing terms of 1.47% for 5 years and 2.46% for 10 years to partner organizations for their portion of the Fire Hall seismic upgrade project.
Okay, that's
Second.
moved, seconded. Any discussion? That would just be, for clarity, as we do the seismic upgrades on the Fire Hall, we have other areas, organizations, some regional district electoral areas and Council tribes who also contribute to the operating and capital of the fire department. So this would be a way of offering them financing terms if they did not have the money in their budgets specifically to finance their portion. Okay.
Okay.
So any other questions? Councillor Bruce?
Yeah, I was just trying to get a little more clarity. So Cowichan Tribes and CBRD couldn't borrow money themselves, so we're loaning them money, or how does that work?
Cowichan Tribes and CVRD could definitely borrow money themselves if that's how they chose to pay their share. We've offered them the option of either paying all of their share at once or paying it over time with financing terms provided by the city, because it is a fairly large amount, and we still don't right now know what the final number will be, because the project's not yet complete.
And if we go in this direction, does that mean some of the funds that the city has in reserves are tied up then for that period of time?
Yes.
So would it not be better for the city to encourage them to get their own financing rather than the city finance it for them?
The cash being used for this project, we have sufficient reserves over the time period that we will not be cash strapped ourselves during that time. However, you know, the interest actually that we would be charging may also be more than we would earn if it was in our bank account. So currently, we're not earning those kind of rates on our own investments. So is, at this time, it's beneficial for the city to actually offer these financing terms.
Okay, does that answer your questions?
Yeah, I'm just not sure whether it makes sense for the city to tie up capital for 10 years at 2.4%. How many dollars were we talking about again? Approximately?
CVRD share is $281,000 roughly, and Tribe's share is $142 roughly.
Just meaning that in the next few years, if the city comes up with some projects and we need some money for it, and we've tied this up without encouraging these other groups to go find their own financing, we don't have those monies available, if I've read that correctly.
That's correct. Okay, further discussion on the motion? And realize that this is an offer. It's not, it does not make an agreement, and they have opportunities to either fund that through their own reserves or other sources of borrowing. Councillor Jackson.
You're absolutely right. They can go and take out their own loans if they want to. However, I think in terms of working together, being neighborly, you know, we've tried to do outreach to our neighbors and work together in unison for, you know, joint projects. It hasn't always been that way, and it hasn't always been that friendly, and I think that this shows really goodwill on the side of the city, and I just think it's a good idea.
Councillor Horgan?
Yeah, I'm not sure that I would agree that it's a good idea. I would be a little uncomfortable loaning out, is it nearly $400,000 of the city's money? If something does come up, as Councillor Bruce mentioned, we may have to go borrow money ourselves to do the project. I'm uncomfortable with the city acting like a bank, to be quite honest.
Could I ask a question of Ms. Solder? Has this offer been officially provided to those organizations at this point, and they have accepted them or not?
We have given notice under the agreement, yes.
Okay, but they have not.
We have not heard back.
Heard back at this point. Okay.
Just around 1%, I think.
Was a mechanism?
There's varying terms.
So if this was was this a mechanism that was considered under the agreements that we signed with them for the fire service?
No, Your Worship, it's a bit of an attempt to, we've been identifying that this project's been on the capital list for a number of years. Because of the city's approach in funding it, because of the Police Bridge and Capital Fund, we've been identifying it as coming from reserves for a number of years. So it's possible that the other organizations hadn't quite picked up on the fact that there's a portion of that like we're borrowing from reserves, but we need them to kick in on going towards it, right. Which is why we structured it in this manner. They could go and get other funding for it, but also keep in mind that as Ms. Solder has referred to, that currently this is in excess of what we're currently achieving on average in our investments. And I don't know whether I have the rate right in front of me, but you know, a lot of our terms are in the 3-year range, 3-year closed terms, and I can't recall, but my recollection is that it's less than 1.4 even right now. Now, if council doesn't like the 2.46, or you want to keep it limited because the 10 years is sort of causing some concern, I think we could scale that back to the 5-year as an example, or I mean, it's up to council and it's.
Okay, I think the questions here we're challenging both the liquidity of the money and the issue of a 10-year term being fixed at a fairly favorable rate. You know, it is beneficial to us now, but if interest rates were to change in that period, that there's a risk to that. So I think those are the questions that I've heard from the table.
It also, well, I don't know if that changes that, but it also meant that Area E in particular would likely have to go to a petition process to go and borrow funds unless they're under an assent level and other issues. So us providing sort of annual payments through our normal sort of reserve repayment terms would would sort of enable that to be a little easier on their part. And Cowichan Tribes is a whole nother scenario borrowing-wise, right? So it's a little more problematic for them to get borrowing.
Okay. So I guess my question too is then, so had they been approached to that and told that they can fund it in other ways?
The letter that was provided asked if they what they wanted to do for their options, pay it all at once or use some financing terms. Previously, when the city has had large capital expenditures for the fire hall, such as a fire truck, which we just finished making lease payments for, the city took on those lease payments. Our partners participated in those lease payments through their regular billing from the operating. Also, with respect to other large capital purchases, they contribute on an annual basis to the reserve fund that helps pay for the fire trucks in the future. So we try to split those costs so that we don't have bumpy costs where their tax rates would go up enormously in 1 year as opposed to being spread out over time. We haven't specifically put aside funds earmarked for the fire hall seismic upgrade as we always had ours in the Police Bridge and Capital Fund. So this would mean a huge increase for our partners for 1 year, and by offering them payment terms, so to speak, we're more in keeping with what we've been doing with other large capital purchases for the fire hall over the last many years.
Okay. All right. Okay, I'm going to call the question if everybody's had their discussion. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. And Councillor Horgan opposed.
Okay.
We move to report, oh, sorry.
No, we're still on
We are there.
10.
Yes, we move to 10.1, reports of committees, and this is the...
No.
1.3.
Sorry.
10.1.3,
sorry.
we're still on.
Just-
We haven't.
I missed my check marks, so we're on number 3. Thank you.
Yeah.
10.1.3.
So, Cowichan Mini Mall utility bill reduction request. The council deny the request of the Gulf Pacific Property Management for reduction or leakage credit, approximately $4,900, on the January to June utility bill for Cowichan Mini Mall, aka the Village Green Mall.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? Councillor Bruce.
I'm not convinced yet that we should be charging this to the business owner. It seemed just a little bit strange of the magnitude of the amount of water that was used in that period of time. And I know we don't want to set a precedent, but just felt that there should be maybe some more discussion and some more investigation before we just say no to the business owner. And I'm sure that staff have probably done that a little bit already with the business owner, but it seemed like an awful lot of water that was more than what the usual use was, and everybody's looking into it and nobody has an answer. I'm just not sure that we should just charge that amount right off the get-go, but open for other thoughts.
Thank you. Further discussion? Councillor Jackson.
Through yourself, I wonder if either Mr. DeVertai or somebody could talk about the process that you've actually already gone through trying to get to the bottom of this.
Yeah, so Public Works staff have gone back to the location on several occasions. They've tested the meter to make sure that the meter is working properly. They can do that by turning off the water and checking the meter readings, and turning the water back on and checking the meter readings. So they have done that. They've also investigated any leaks on the city side of the system and have found none. They have not replaced the meter, and the meter readings have returned to normal, so that indicates that the meter is working properly at this time. In addition, the people from the Cowichan Mini Mall, we've been in discussions with them. They have assured us that they have gone and inspected all of their pipes and to ensure that there is no leak. And they tell us that they have not been able to find a leak on their property either. They do have outside taps, and they have now instituted locks on the taps, or taken the handles off so that people cannot use the taps. I'm not sure if that was the case at this time, But they have assured me that that is like that now, and that they do have security that has been making regular patrols of the lot.
Thank you.
Any further discussion or questions? Councillor Horgan.
I did read in the letter of the correspondence back and forth that they put the security locks or whatever you want to call it on the taps several years ago. It wasn't just recently.
Councillor Bruce.
If we do pass this, I would like to encourage staff, and I'm sure they will already, but to send a warm and friendly letter that says if they have any other ideas down the road, that council would be more than willing to relook at this if something came up again that they discovered something that was amiss. So.
Okay. Thank you. I'm going to call the question then. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries.
10.1.4, the Cowichan Agricultural Society Utility Bill Reduction Request. The Council deny the Cowichan Agricultural Society's request to forgive the current water bill of $437.30, which reflects all of 2014 and half of 2015, and to charge the Society a lower rate.
Second.
Okay. Discussion? Okay. Hearing none. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries.
10.1.5, Accessibility and Inclusiveness Brochure, that the Accessibility and Inclusiveness Brochure as attached to the September 3rd, 2015 report from Corporate Services Coordinator be approved. And that the Accessibility and Inclusiveness Brochure be included in the 2016 Business License Renewal Mailout that takes place in December of 2015.
Second.
Okay. Any discussion? Councillor Jackson, do you want to speak
Yeah, just
on
to
this?
say that this is the Disability Issues Committee came up with this, working very closely with the staff here at City Hall, who came up with a whole bunch of great suggestions. And basically, it's just basic ways in which to make your business accessible and visible and available for people who suffer from disabilities, not only because it's the right thing to do, but because if you do that, it will give you economic benefit. This area has a very large percentage of people that suffer from disabilities, physical disabilities and mental disabilities, but people with walkers and canes and well, strollers and all those kinds of things. So it just makes economic sense and just decent personal sense to do this. And it's easy things that every business can do. And we just thought that we would like to make this available to everybody that's got a business in the city of Duncan.
Thank you. Any other discussion on this item? Okay. Hearing none. All in favor? Opposed? That motion carries.
Thank you.
Okay. So move to the next item.
10.1.6, Community Energy and Emissions Plan, that Council adopt the Community Energy and Emissions Plan is attached to the October 5th, 2015 report of the planner, and that Council directs staff to begin work on implementing the actions recommended in the Community Energy and Emissions Plan.
Okay.
Second.
Is there a seconder? Okay. Any discussion? Mr. No, would you like to give some context for this?
This was a program funded through BC Hydro, their Quick Start Community Energy and Emissions Plan, and it is administered by the Community Energy Association. And so they've worked with us to do the workshop that we held with staff and stakeholders in order to develop the plan. And the CEA has also followed up regularly and will be throughout the implementation of the plan as well, providing support. And the Energy and Emissions Plan aims to reduce greenhouse gas emissions throughout the community, and so there are a number of actions, mostly within the 1 to 3 year period, that we will be focusing on implementing.
Okay. Thank you. Any discussion or questions on that? Hearing none, I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. So we go to item 10.2, which is the October 1st Environment Committee recommendations, and I believe Councillor Staples, you can
Okay. Energy reduction workshop and tap-by-tap water and energy savings kits. The council approved the expenditure of $500 Environment Committee budget to be allocated towards shared advertising costs and refreshments at North Cowichan's Free Home Energy Improvements Workshop, being held at Alexander Aiken School on December 5th, 2015. And the council approved the expenditure of $1,200 Environment Committee budget to be allocated towards the purchase of 50 tap-by-tap water and energy saving kits, $24 each, to be given to residents of Duncan at the workshop. And that the City of Duncan's Environment Committee set up a booth at the workshop where the water and energy savings kits will be given to residents of Duncan, and information about Duncan's community and energy emissions plan will be provided.
Okay.
So moved. Or second, sorry?
Seconded, yep, thank you. Any discussion or questions? Councillor Jackson.
What is, unfortunately, I missed the last meeting. What is a tap-by-tap water and energy savings kit? What does that do?
Do you know what's inside the kit?
Oh, I didn't bring that with me, but it does have aerators for taps, and it also has a replacement shower head, a low-flow shower head, and I can't recall what else is in the kit, but we can get that information to council.
And I don't remember more than that either. I remembered the
Sorry, you guys.
shower one. Sorry.
Put them on the spot.
I beg your pardon.
I have an email I can bring up.
Okay.
All right. Any questions or discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries.
And 10.22, donation towards replacement trees at Mount Provo Elementary School, that the City of Duncan contribute $200 to the Mount Provo Elementary School to assist in the cost of replacing the trees that were illegally cut down near the playground, with funds to come from the Environment Committee budget.
Second.
Seconded. Any discussion on this? Councillor Horgan.
I read all the information on this little episode, and it did say that some business person was going to pay for all these trees. I don't know if everybody else read that.
So we did talk about that at the Environment Committee, but the Environment Committee said that we wanted to support the businesses that were providing them as well, so that they weren't bearing all the costs, as a goodwill gesture from the community and our ongoing support of. Well, the fact was, it was a really awful thing that happened, and so we had just completed handing out all those trees for the city. What was that, in September for National Tree Day? So as an extension of that, we wanted to reach out and provide more support.
Thank you.
Okay. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Question, Your Worship? Sorry.
Yes.
So is this 200, is just for clarity, because this says it's contribute 200 to the school. So is this 200 to the school or to the business? Because they're missing.
It would. I think it would be more appropriate to the school.
To the school, yeah.
And they would
And
use
they
the
would
funds for that purpose.
Yeah.
Garden or
They
whatever.
received,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
100, Peter, wasn't it? 100? It was 100. Didn't I just read 100?
It's 200
Okay.
in the materials, yeah.
Oh, God, how did I read 100 in my head?
Okay, so that has been carried, and so we move on to new business. And we have a proclamation request for Community Inclusion Month for October 2015 to be proclaimed Community Inclusion Month in the City of Duncan.
So moved.
Moved, seconder. Okay, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. We have a proclamation for Foster Family Month, and that the month of October 2015 be proclaimed Foster Family Month in the City of Duncan. Moved, seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you.
The only discussion I had, it took me 10 minutes to figure out that that wasn't somebody's name, it was a foster family.
Yes.
I was looking for the
Support of foster
Fosters.
families, yes. Yeah, the way they abbreviate these proclamations. Anyway, it's good information for people to be aware of these things. This is why we continue to do proclamations. Some councils do not, and I heard an explanation from the Mayor of North Cowichan of legal opinion they received years ago that you know, if they approve one, they could never refuse one. So I thought that was a little bit, you know, too technical, and I think it's just we we've never had real issues with them, and it does rate, we're usually approached on proclamations by community organizations who want to raise awareness, and so this is one of their ways of raising that awareness. So we have one more, which is a day for our common future, and that December 11th be proclaimed a day for our common future in the city of Duncan.
So moved.
Okay, second. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. So we move to reports of mayor and council. Any councillors who would like to report?
No.
Councillor Staples, okay. Anyone else? Okay, and
Probably be talking about the same thing, went to the UBCM
and other things, yeah, probably. So I'm going to give my report. I'll be brief on that to allow others to maybe, or others to give comments on UBCM. Of course, we did attend that for the week of September 15th going forward. There was a lot of good workshops at the conference and lots of good networking. I spent a good deal of my time networking on files like the Island Quarter Foundation and Island Coastal Economic Trust, and didn't get to as many workshops as I normally would have. But I found the plenary sessions quite stimulating. There was a great deal of interesting and fairly predictable motions or resolutions that passed through UBCM with good debate. I think Councillor Sebring from North Cowichan holds the record for standing at the no mics on resolutions.
He hasn't met a microphone he didn't like.
He hasn't met a So, but it was quite good, and I'm a little bit on the tired side today, so trying to recall some of the key resolutions, and maybe Councillor Staples or Councillor Horgan, if there's some resolution that's stuck in their mind with respect to. Well, it's whatever's important in your mind. I also been quite active again with also Mr. Divertai volunteering his time as well with Success by Six over the last couple of months. It seems like we've met quite regularly between executive and the council partner tables, and have been working quite hard to get implementation of some of the most important objectives in our strategic plan going forward for infant and early childhood development from 0 to 6. Provincial program, which has provided funds in many communities for implementation of what we would call collaborative or coordinated efforts in moving towards our goals and success. So we've had some work with the executive with respect to our financial, and we do appreciate Mr. Dervatai's working on our financial documents, so that for people who are at our Success by Six table, who are not all financial businesses and have degrees in reading spreadsheets, have got a better sense now of the things we're able to do and where the funds are and whether we're able to make progress on those. So that I appreciate that, Mr. Dervatai. We had unfortunately, I missed a workshop on First Nations collaborative workshop that was done by the FCM, and maybe Councillor Staples, you can comment on that. I wasn't able to get there at the last minute. And one other thing was the, of course, raising of the Salish Bear Totem by Stan Modeste up on the Malahat on the 7th of October. It was actually I think most of council came. I'm not sure. Councillor Bruce, you weren't able to make it, but we all traveled up together, carpooled up to the top of the Malahat, and we had actually a rare opportunity to see the raising ceremony and see the mask dance in a public space. We weren't allowed to take record of it through pictures or recordings, but it is substantially and quite different than the typical type of First Nation cultural dance that we see in ceremony. So that was a dedication. The family of Stan Modeste were, I think, extremely grateful for the recognition and support of the city to do this in a way that was culturally important to them, but also recognized their ancestor and their father in this work. So it was restored by the city into its more original carving that it was done, because it had been modified apparently over the years. It was one of the poles that was included in the 1966, I believe, centennial to celebrate the joining of Vancouver Island to the British Columbia. So those were significant poles that the provincial government had done and put on a number of places along the island, and so this is, we thought, a significant pole. So I guess one of the funny things was that of course, when it was missing, somebody finally noticed when they were doing the upgrades on the top of Malahat and realized that it wasn't there anymore. And so they'd wondered what happened, and they were very grateful to realize that the city of Duncan had picked it up and actually was going to do something with it. So, all right, and at this point, I've attended a number of ICE-T, Island Coast Economic Trust events, and also a submission to the Standing Committee on Finance for the province, which we've done now a couple of times to make a case for providing recharging of the fund for continuing the economic development work. And if for council who hasn't looked at it, if you look at the annual report, I think there's some in the councillor lounge to look at some of the range of work that we've done over since 2007 when we started expending funds. And the website, Island Coast Economic Trust website, has every project and best practices that we've done through the whole trust, so you can go back in there and look at what the results are, what the successes are, get updates and see how the project was undertaken. So we've got First Nation communities, non-profit community groups, and municipalities who have used this fund and model to get incremental economic development in their communities. So a fair bit of work going on that, and that concludes my report, at least for now. This highlights anyway.
I just wanted to just briefly, and I'm sure this has just skipped your mind, that not this coming Friday, but the following Friday, for people who want to come at noon, it's the poppy flag raising in readiness for Remembrance Day. So anybody who wants to come and stand outside, I guess it's out here, for the flags for the Legion at noon on the 30th.
Okay. So. Councillor Staples.
Thank you. We have a phone ringing. So the UBCM, I guess that was the farthest thing. I can't believe that was actually has been in the past 30 days, because it now seems like it was an awfully long time ago that we were there. And Councillor Bell and I had the lovely privilege of going with Councillor Horgan on his first UBCM. And so thank you, Councillor Horgan, for spending so much time with us during that. It was a wonderful experience, and it's always good for us to have time away from here to get to know each other, and it was a pleasure to be there with you. And at the UBCM, I think the biggest things for me personally was the drought planning plenary session that I went to was actually not the session itself, which I was moderately disappointed in, but the fact that the ministry has actually followed up with people in our community, and myself included, to look at moving forward from planning into implementation. So that has been a very interesting process, talking to them about that, and I look forward to more conversations and to them reaching out with other people in our community. And the social procurement, we're talking about bringing social procurement to City Council. We passed that, and Mr. DeVertai and I got up at a ridiculous hour in the morning, to go to a session. Some of our sessions start at 7:15, at 7:30 in the morning, and so it's a lot of very heavy information at a very early time in the morning. But there was quite a few other members of our community there from different governments, and we really look forward to having her back here to begin looking at that for our region. And I think that there was a ton of, I got to see one of my heroes from high school that I met, David Suzuki. I got to meet him again. I haven't seen him since I was 17 and moved away from home. I used to volunteer for, not then the foundation, but for a program I used to work for in the Fraser Valley. And so I was excited to get to see him again and thank him for inspiring me at such a young age. And we passed the Blue Dot movement as a UBCM, which was very exciting. I think one of the hardest debates that I've ever been a part of also took place, though, around addressing rape culture in British Columbia. It was a very challenging debate that I still feel very charged about. And all of this is actually available on the UBCM website, the debates. It's one that I think people should look at to see some of the conversations that are needing to happen in our province. And it was a great conference always, though, and wonderful to get together with everyone. I'd also just like to mention our youth council, the Duncan Youth Council, will be going to do a presentation to the annual Vancouver Island Conference, the AVICC. They're going to present about bringing the youth councils together from Vancouver Island to have their own youth conference and to also attend the AVICC as youth delegates so they can see the process. There's 3 councils currently on the island, and ours is still very unique. And I think our youth council members are on 3 committees regionally, and they haven't even made their presentation to ask to be on the committees. Yeah. So, and I've heard nothing but really positive feedback about it from the regional district and is it the safety committee?
Yeah, safety advisory.
Michelle, you know that they're on the safety commission, the youth council.
It's
I can't remember what the
regional
name.
District Community Safety Commission. So
Yes.
now that was appointed just the other night.
Yeah, so and the youth have, they're very excited about it, and they have a lot of conversation and debate about what they learn. They come back and they share it with the other youth at our weekly meetings, so that's been extremely positive, and I really look forward to their presentation to the AVICC board, and also hopefully they will approve it so they can come and work with local councils from all over the island at their own plenary session. So I just wanted to report back on that. And where else can I go? The Environment Committee meeting, we've talked about some of the resolutions. I look forward to a lot of the work that's happening. I did get to go to the FCM, which is the Federal Canadian Municipalities. They had Federation. There's so many acronyms in this. It's ridiculous. Anyways, I did get to go to that for the day. It was very interesting hearing where people are at in terms of relationships and governance building between First Nations and non-First Nations. I would say that we're doing a lot in our valley. That was pretty clear, I think, at that presentation. And it's really wonderful to hear a lot of the different things, ideas that people are moving forward with in other areas. So I really appreciated being there. And I attended the first advisory design panel meeting, it's going to be a very exciting and dynamic group of people to work with. And I really look forward to that. And the Malahat ceremony was phenomenal. It was absolutely beautiful in the pouring rain. And even after, it rained hard that day. It was the hardest rain I think we've had in like 6 months. But it felt perfect for what happened there. It was very beautiful, and I really want to thank Couch and Tribes and the families, and Judy Hill from the committee for all the work that she did on that, and the committee itself, and Tricia, too, because Tricia did a ton of work with that, so thank you. And I believe that is all, other than I look forward to going to a chamber meeting with you one of these days soon, Councillor Horgan. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Something I'd also like to make council aware of is the VIA conference that's coming up on the 28th, 29th in Nanaimo at their conference center. It's the Vancouver Island Economic Alliance, and it's their State of the Island Economic Report. And there's a number of workshops in different sectors, and then of course there'll be some plenary work as well, and then I believe the Premier will be there on the 28th for dinner and providing an address. But it's That was set up by the province a number of years ago, gave them an endowment to undertake this work on looking at Vancouver Island in its entire region. So it might be of interest. So it's, I think there's probably still registrations available, and there are also scholarships, which Island Coast Economic Trust provides to councillors or small towns who might want to send some staff people or other interested parties to go to. So, okay. So with that, we go to question period. Yes.
Just for the record, Your Worship, I would like to know the origin of the prohibition of wolf dogs and wolf hybrids in the adjustments to the animal control bylaw.
I think that question was answered somewhat specifically. Was that posed at the Committee of the Whole? I can't answer that question for you. I don't know specifically the origin of it.
I totally object. I could probably get a dozen people in.
Yeah.
The city has, with respect to breed-specific bans, was fairly hands-off on going down that road, but through the courts actually have considered wolf hybrids to not be domesticated animals. And so through some research that we did as staff, looked into that. But we can provide that to you, Margot, to give some background on that.
I'm not on the right camera.
Okay. Yeah, so we can provide that background on where that sort of process came from, as to where that came about, and give you some background on the court decisions around whether a wolf hybrid is actually a domesticated animal.
Well, how are you going to really define and prove that?
Well, that's another matter. We typically...
I lived with a wolf hybrid for the best 15 years of my life, but I could have told you probably with anything.
Yeah, well, in large part that will come, like anything else, or not anything else, but many of the things the city does, we work on a complaint basis. So if there's an issue with an aggressive dog, and it's a wolf hybrid, then we would likely be dealing with it if we get some complaints. There's many infractions perhaps we might have around the city that we don't run around.
So Margot, it's not,
chasing
this isn't a debate. You've asked a question, and it's what...
Aggressive dogs, Your Worship, are already covered in the...
Yes, yeah. Okay, but we will get that information for you specifically.
Yeah, I can provide that background for you, Mark.
All right, so there is no closed meeting, so...
I have a question.
Yes?
Yes. Somebody asked me today, although you did, through you to Mr. DeVertai, you did mention about the line painting when and as available. I did have somebody ask me a couple of days ago when the center line was going to be painted down Kenneth Street.
Yeah, that's likely. The line painter done the majority of their work, and then they had some particular incident came up or issue, and they were to come back, but they've since had some staffing issues so they're a bit behind now. So they will be back before the winter.
Rains.
Yeah, well,
Okay.
the rains are here, so.
Thank you.
All right, okay. So a motion to adjourn?
So moved?
Seconded? All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. All right, thank you.
Perfect. Can I have every